All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics and Money. Yes, I am talking to you from overseas. So I'm in Europe. So I will do some other live streams later on. I just got here. So anyway, we're very excited. Elizabeth is back in Texas there. So
Mhm.
we are connecting with you guys. What are we talking about today, Elizabeth?
Okay, so we're talking about two things. One, we're talking about a currency war with Asia. So this
Ooh.
is, I know, so this is very interesting, and it's actually also like really important. So the Trump administration is has been talking about, but is talking
Mhm.
about a weaker U.S. dollar. Which
Uh-huh.
means a less valuable on the global stage US dollar, and trying to get the Asian currencies specifically. So we're talking about China, we're talking about the Chinese yuan, we're talking about
Mhm.
the Japanese yen, South Korea. These Asian currencies to actually appreciate their currencies. That means that their currencies are worth more on the global
Mm.
stage. And Trump has actually accused these Asian countries, including
Yeah.
China, which is honestly very possible. He's probably right that these Asian
Yeah.
countries have been keeping their currencies less valuable
Mhm.
because that gives them more power on the global stage in terms of trade. So that's what we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about.
but hold on. At the same time, wouldn't that be like a smart strategy if they wanted to do it that way, rather than
Yes.
why do we have to interpret it in a wrong or a negative way? I mean, I look
So
at it like a strategy, no more, no less.
it is. It is absolutely a strategy, and it's been a strategy that's worked really well.
Uh-huh.
But there are two really big pieces as to why this is important right now. The first reason is that as we're looking at the dollar and trying to close the trade deficit gap between China and the
Mhm.
US specifically, because
Yeah,
obviously that's the largest gap. As
definitely.
we're looking at that, if we have a stronger dollar, that means things that are made in the United States are more expensive on the global stage.
Yeah.
What we want to do is have it be less expensive on the global stage. However, there's a bunch of problems with, devaluing the dollar. So there's a bunch of problems there. But if you're looking at de-dollarization, which is happening on a global stage, right, on the
Yeah.
global stage right now,
Uh-huh.
um, what we're looking at is if China wants the yuan to be considered more of a stable and valuable currency, which they're not looking at making it the reserve currency. That's not something that we're watching
Yeah, yeah,
happening.
yeah.
But if they do want it to be a stronger player, they
Mhm.
might want to value it more. The problem with that on the other side is that then their Chinese goods become more expensive on the
Expensive.
global stage. So
Yeah.
right now we're seeing, and that's what Trump wants. Trump is trying to get these currencies that have been historically devalued by their own governments. He's
Uh-huh.
trying, or at least saying, he wants them to appropriately value their currencies so that
Yeah.
their goods are no longer overly competitive on the world stage.
Well, that depends again of how other, because now you're looking at, if there is this currency war, you're going to now be looking at Asian countries really shifting their priorities regarding the financial aspects. I mean, I look at just what happened, the last 48 hours or almost 3 days, 72 hours, if I may, between Indonesia and China. I think
Mhm.
they signed some deals that pertain also some of its aspect has to do with finance. It's
Yeah.
because they're seeing what's coming. For us, on the other hand, what the government is not telling the people is that they've been quietly going on printing money. I mean, I got to
Oh,
work.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
found
yeah.
out, as a matter of fact, I did put a note on this. I found out that the feds were very quiet, and the way they went about it is when they bought about $43 billion in bonds. Well, how are you gonna, when you buy bonds? How
Oh,
are you gonna?
no, I
Yeah,
know. Oh,
that's
no,
what
this
I'm
is
saying.
this
They
is
are
awful.
doing it
Yeah.
stealthily, and to me, that's already been almost, and I was one time having a conversation with Rick Turn. You remember Rick, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
he did mention, don't be surprised, it's a foregone conclusion regarding QEs.
So I think that because QE is so wildly unpopular,
Yeah,
so that's money printing, right? Like it's the
yeah.
fancy word for money printing, is really unpopular right now. But that was so sneaky. That was so
That's what was
sneaky.
the problem about it. They went about it quietly,
So
asking the
sneaky.
average citizen whether they know about it or not. So
Hmm.
why? Why are they doing it that way? That tells you the story right there.
Well, no, and I think that if they had not done it quietly, people would have
Yeah,
absolutely thrown a fit. But you're absolutely right. It was like a blip in the headlines, and then nobody has talked about it since. Like it was like it almost didn't exist. But I
yeah,
mean, it's more and more and more. And so that's sort of what we're talking about with the devaluation of the dollar. The problem with that then is inflation. And that's overall, that's like destroyed the United
right.
States more or less
Yeah,
right now is the United States is under, for the US, very severe inflation. It's not like the United States is the only place that has had inflation
yeah,
um, throughout time. But yeah, I mean, they're making it worse. And so that's part of why I think this topic is actually very interesting and important. Is that being done on purpose? Is the
yeah,
dollar being devalued on
yeah.
purpose?
But
Now,
they're not giving it enough coverage. That's why people do not know. I mean, every citizen do not know what's going on with this currency issues and all that, because
no, but
also our government wants to make sure that people do not know. They go about the policy, but not inform the people.
no, of course not. I
That's how I
mean,
see it.
not that the average person would really know anyway. I mean, our viewers,
Yeah, yeah,
obviously, you guys
yeah.
are, a lot
No,
more,
they're
quite
different.
frankly, a lot
A lot
more
more.
informed than the average person is.
Yeah,
But I do think that that's what we're watching happen right now with the US dollar does
yeah,
seem to me like it's on purpose, whether they're telling people that or not. I mean, it would be very challenging to tell the public, hey, we're trying to devalue the dollar, and here are the reasons.
the
What
reasons.
I will say is that I am certain that the Trump administration, I am certain that Scott Bessent knows, Peter Navarro, I'm sure all of them know and understand that de-dollarization is well underway. And so, in terms of devaluing the dollar and making it less
Hmm.
desirable for
Hmm.
global trade, that's already happening. So it seems kind of odd that I mean, are they expediting that? Are they expediting the more or less fall of the dollar? And then that's kind of an interesting choice to be making at the same time that Donald Trump went out and got basically $2 trillion from the Middle East, from the Saudis, and from Qatar,
Yeah,
in sort of a techno dollar as a replacement for the petrodollar to fund basically tech and defense. I think it was like tech, defense, and pharmaceuticals. Uh,
that's correct.
so
That's correct.
that was an interesting
Yeah.
choice.
Mm. What is going to be now that many observers, especially in the financial world, what they're going to be now aiming at, or keeping an eye open on, is that how this is now going to change the financial landscape. And when I say
Huge
landscape,
thing.
I
Yeah.
am referring to it on the global stage, but with specifically Asia market,
Hmm.
because the changes that's coming up to the global economy, they are really, if you look right now, I mean, I've been reading some articles, even when I was flying, I was reading some stuff. It's because you start to wonder, they are thinking, they meaning Southeast Asian nations and whole Asia for that matter, they are thinking in terms of how can we move collectively. And when they move collectively, you include the financial policy or the fiscal policy as or the monetary policy part of that shift that is going. So I'd be curious to see how this is going to translate moving forward with this.
I am too, especially with the 90-day pause.
Which is
Especially
going to come is going to come to the end soon.
Right. So especially with this 90-day pause, I'm very interested to see how they actually end up, maneuvering things around. Karakulak said Trump is setting up for a CBDC already. So that's a really interesting point.
Very interesting. Yeah.
And David, you brought this up before the show, that the EU is already well on its way towards the end of the year for implementing their CBDC.
That is correct. As a matter of fact, I found out this morning right here. So I'm going to guys send you an article. I'm going to post rather, not send. I'll post an article in the chat box there. You guys can read up on it later on, but I'm going to give you just the gist of it. So the idea of the CBDC is a foregone conclusion now for the Europeans. Why? Because Lagarde, she's like the head of the central bank, the European Central Bank. So it's a fait accompli, as they say. It's set now for October 25 as a deadline to launch the central bank digital currency. So this is what the president of the central bank, Christine Lagarde, stated. Now, here is where the question that we need to ask ourselves. And the question pertains to whether with this move, is Europe now ready to stand on its feet, financially speaking? We're not talking politically yet. So could this pave the way for Europe now to gain some sort of an advantage? It's a question worth asking. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Why am I asking this question? Because Europeans are now thinking in these terms because Donald Trump just signed an executive order banning the digital currency. This is where the trick is. Makes you just wonder how things are going to go for Europe. Because if Europeans succeed with this, there is a lot. I am right now on the ground. I'm hearing conversation. You talk to people. So you can, to those who happen to be in or know, there is a conversation about, can we ever gain independence from the US?
Well, in a way, that's an interesting question because I'm not sure. I personally, this is my personal opinion, I don't personally think a central bank digital currency actually gives Europeans freedom.
Freedom.
In fact, and I'm a little bit shocked that Europe is going with it to the extent that it is. But I don't know that a central bank digital currency brings freedom. In a similar situation to the euro, for example, the euro has more or less failed the majority of the countries that are actually in the EU that have adopted the euro. And if you look at the countries that have and have not adopted the euro, for example, Greece fell into the problem that it did. Greece was in a lot of trouble because they couldn't manipulate their own currency to get out of their collapse. And so the euro did not exactly work for everybody. And so it feels like even if it is Europe getting out of the frying pan, basically, of being reliant on the United States, is that out of the frying pan into the fire of all of a sudden you now have a central bank digital currency. And, not the European nations, although they are in the EU, are not all the same. And they don't have the same needs. They don't have the same needs financially. They don't have the same needs politically. They have different populations with very different needs. And so I'm personally not a fan of central bank digital currency. I think that if Trump did do that, I think he would be the most unpopular president because the US has a really negative sentiment towards central bank digital currency. And it was funny. I saw an article the other day that said, people in China, so it's like sentiments on artificial intelligence, right? And it was talking about China specifically versus the US in terms of sentiment on AI. So the Chinese population overall, not obviously there's outliers, But overall, the sentiment is actually really popular for AI. It's very positive, all the good things that you can do with artificial intelligence. Whereas
Yeah.
here in the United States, it's very, very negative. And then, but you look at overall, what has the United States done with the surveillance powers that it has? After, I mean, we have Edward
Sure.
Snowden that came out. We have Julian Assange that
Yeah.
released all of this, you know, that whistle blew all of this stuff. So of course there is a negative connotation
Yeah.
to artificial intelligence, because that means that the government would have to be responsible with that level of power, and they have
Yeah.
not been to date.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole Patriot Act wasn't about security, as they say, and it was about part of it has to do with the surveillance. But there is another aspect to that, believe it or not. It has to do with the financial aspects of it, and this was from a macroeconomic, macro view aspects of that. Because if, like I mentioned before, if you think about what the IBS is doing, the International Bank of Settlements, you have to understand that big picture to understand, of course, what took place in 9/11. Only the surprising part of it, which some of you might know, some of you might not, it was during that time, specifically, Donald Rumsfeld, who used to be the Secretary of Defense, announced about the missing of $4 trillion. Makes you just
Yeah.
wonder, how the heck will a government miss or lose a $4 trillion that is not on the books? This is where the IBS comes in. So
Right.
now, to go back to this point of the CBDC, there's also concerns here in Europe. Believe it or not, this might shock you. There is concern about those who are not in support. This is why Christine Lagarde, is shoving this down the European countries, because the resistance to this approach is already, and their concern has to do with two things: the privacy and the control,
Yeah.
because they are
Of
concerned.
course.
Yeah, and the same thing what is saying, because the politicians are saying, you know what, this is our opportunity now or never. The Americans are saying no to the CBDC. We can take it and run with it.
Yeah,
That's the
but what I'm saying is that's not necessarily a good thing. So
no, it's not.
I
No,
mean,
it's not. You're right.
right now, Europe is in a lot of the same problem that the United States is. The Western world across the board is facing a lot of the same issues. And so it's not like Europe is doing amazing. And then when the Nord Streams just exploded,
Sure. Yeah.
you know, that made stuff like electricity more expensive. So, you know, when I think it was Germany decommissioned nuclear power, and interestingly enough, China is poised to be the largest nuclear energy generator in the world. They're
Well,
building.
yeah, but think about also the technology they're going to be using. They're going to be using
Absolutely.
yeah, they're going to be using a new technology. Is it what they call it? Thorn?
Thorium.
Thorium. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So they are moving into the direction. Just for us in state of Texas, do you know we need about 30 nuclear power plants to maintain our? You remember what happened when we ran out of electricity?
Oh
Few
yeah, I
years
mean,
ago?
yeah.
So,
During the
think about it.
snowpocalypse, yeah.
Yeah. So think about it. So the idea that like the Chinese moving forward with that in a much advanced way of dealing with this. I mean, the Europeans going to be holding the end of the stick, because the Europeans depend so much on uranium from Africa, especially in the Sahel region. We know we talked about it in the last video we did release for our sponsor, and it made more sense because Europeans are stuck now. And if they go with this direction with the CBDC, you can only imagine how the citizens are going to feel.
Well, so David, it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I remember reading an article, and it was like Elon Musk and Bill Gates or something were talking about the utopia that AI is going to bring. That artificial intelligence, CBDC, 15-minute cities, 2-day work weeks. I think it was Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Who who said, hey, everyone's going to have a 2-hour work or 2-day work week. Everyone is going to be so happy. It's going to be this amazing artificial intelligence utopia where the AI robots do absolutely everything for you and you basically do nothing, and we'll have universal basic income and central bank digital currencies, and you can walk to wherever you want because it's a 15-minute city. And I was like, do they live here? Do they live on this planet?
Yeah.
And the reality is that they don't. They live in their own world. And so the people who are looking at central bank digital currencies are the people who are more or less won't be affected by it. They're the people who are putting themselves in situations that they will be great or okay no matter what. They're the ones building bunkers all over the world so that they're fine no matter what happens.
Yeah, there's a company I was made aware of in Boston, I believe, or somewhere in Massachusetts. That's all they do. They build bunkers for millionaires. That makes you just wonder. Business is booming. Makes you wonder why they do that.
I remember I was driving. I think I was driving to see a friend in another city in Texas, and there are billboards for bunker builders. Like if you want to build your own bunker, for a couple $1 million or whatever, you can just go to hire this company that has a billboard on the side of the highway.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking about is just the idea of now how, for example, if this to move forward, this CBDC, because in October, that's when they want to launch it. So that tells you right there where they're thinking here in Europe. And this is why you get now people are on both sides of the arguments. And some of them, as I mentioned earlier, saying, well, it's a good thing because we will be independent from the US. Maybe not. We don't know. But here is another development that is taking place right here. I found out is that the Europeans now wanted to have that independence, not only financially from the US, but also politically speaking. And what they're doing, they are now, you have Germany sending about 5,000 troops to be stationed for a long period of time in Lithuania. Makes you once again wonder, is this also another sign for that the European wants to have that independence from the Americans? I don't buy it. I don't think so. But when you start seeing the signs like this, you have to start to wonder what's going on.
The thing is, the US didn't give Europe a choice. So as the US backed out of the conflict, more or less, basically with Russia and Ukraine, and the US was like, okay, you guys are left out. You're not important in this situation, right? As the US put tariffs on the EU, it's the United States has made it really, really clear that that this administration is not going to subsidize. Subsidize is the kind word to say it, but more or less, not that I think the US is going to stop politically interfering, okay? But that the US is done playing the role that it was playing globally before this administration. So the EU doesn't have a choice but to step up. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing in a sense, because I think Europe should be the master of its own destiny. In fact, I think the European countries should be the masters of their own destiny and choose what's right for them and for their populations, just like the US should do the same. I mean, I believe in global stewardship, of course, but the United States, especially through, like you were talking about, the International Bank of Settlements, the World Bank, the IMF, has not exactly been a good guy. And so the more the US can actually get out of other people's business, it's probably best for everybody. Don't you think?
I agree with you. Couldn't agree more. And
including the US.
Well, yeah, for sure. Because here's the thing: the downfall and the decline, the ongoing decline of the US, is of its own making. Why?
Absolutely.
Because the failed policies about. And this is why, again, I'll go back to the point about Europe, except that I do not see, I could be wrong, I just do not see the Europeans have the determination and the will to really stand on their own feet. They've been on this trajectory for so long that they have been molded. It's like a piece of clay that you molded in any form or shape you want. We
Yeah.
have molded them in a way we want to. I just don't see the Europeans standing on this on their own. The reason why, on the other hand, the Americans are concerned is because there is an emerging power from Far East that we didn't anticipate. I mean, we saw some signs. I made the argument back in early 90s,
Yeah.
way back. I made the argument. And whether you guys want to believe this or not, it's your decision. But here is the word that I used. Mike, my word, in 25 years, do the math from the beginning of early 90s. Mike, my word, in 25 years, you're going to see a different. And here we are. And this is why now you are seeing, we don't know what to do. We're just reacting to event. I'm sure you heard what happened to the international students now in Harvard,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
including President Xi Jinping's daughter.
Yeah.
So it makes you just wonder. We get to this level because that's degrading.
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
it's
when you
yeah.
start preventing international students because you couldn't compete, and all of a sudden you barring them from, and guess what it's going to do. I was communicating yesterday with a dear friend of mine through a different medium. All of it doesn't exist here in the West here, and this came up, and my argument to him was, you know what, this is going to now give an opportunity for Chinese universities to shine because they are moving up the ranking around the world
Well, you
academically.
know what? As a side effect, it may bring cost of university down in the United States.
Oh, well, we wish. We wish.
Bless, bless.
Because it's
Maybe it will.
ridiculous. It's
No,
ridiculous what they charge.
yeah.
You know.
Well, but the thing is, international students are a very large portion of the
Yeah.
people that are paying for university here in the United States. And I think you're right. I think this was the most ridiculous thing they could have done, in the Trump administration could have done, because what I'm not seeing with the Trump administration overall,
Yeah.
especially in this situation,
Yeah.
is that they're not uplifting American students.
No.
And
No.
so, if you want to build a situation where American students are doing better than foreign students, I don't
Yeah.
think the answer is get rid of the foreign students. The answer is uplift American students, give
Students.
them what they need to succeed. And American students, for the most part, are not going to college because of its price, because how expensive it is, especially compared to what they could get in the job market as a college
Yeah.
graduate. Well, so if
Yeah.
you want America to do better, pay for students, especially bright students who have shown academic excellence,
Yeah.
pay for them to go to university, pay for a larger percentage, or bring the cost down, or cut interest rates for
Uh,
students so that
yeah.
students aren't paying somewhere around 7% interest rate. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So there are ways to inspire
Yeah.
Americans, I think the Trump administration could do that they aren't.
Yeah, which will make more sense if we are to, since we're talking about finance here, the aspects of it, like we always say, is geopolitics and money. So
Yeah.
if you think in terms of the geopolitical movements, you're going to also have to think about the fiscal policies that's going to have to go in conjunction with those changes of whatever that might be. And I don't think so the Trump administration is thinking in those terms, because Trump doesn't think in those terms. Trump
Well,
thinks in terms of what's in it for me. In other words, what am I getting out of
yeah.
this, as far as for him, for his family, whatever that is. So we all know how it is. But you're absolutely correct. If we are to reduce the cost, I mean, you see students here. I ran to a guy from California. I
Mhm.
said, "Do you study in Europe?" He said, "Yeah, I'm studying in Europe. I don't study in America." I'm not like
It's
he's from the
expensive.
wealthy family or whatever, but I'm sure
Mhm.
he figure out some programs or something like that. And he looks like, just wants to study law here. And I
Mhm.
said, "You don't want to do it in California?" I said, "No." And
Well,
also wanted to learn about the culture. Well, the thing is, we don't, you have our students don't have and understanding about the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It's not about just the world doesn't. The world is not America. The world thinks differently. Some of us
Yeah.
Americans think that the rest of the world should be thinking like us. No, no, they
Well,
have their own values, they have their own traditions, they have their own way of thinking, and we ought to respect that.
the United States overall has I think, two big reasons why that's the truth. The first is
Yeah,
media manipulation, right? So if you've been watching us for a while, I'm really, really, really against media manipulation,
yeah,
which is rampant and has been as long as both you and I have existed on this planet, David. We
that's
have
true.
never been in an environment, and none of you guys have either, because it's not just the United States. Every media everywhere manipulates their people. That's just a fact. It's been throughout all history that we can remember and record. And so media manipulation is number one. And then number two, if you look at the United States and where it's positioned, the United States only has Mexico and Canada, and they're actually very far away. So if
Yeah,
you, and far away in that they're not easy to get to. When
yeah,
you're in Europe, which I was, the reason we took the break is because I was also in Europe.
yeah,
Um, it's easier to go next door, and you're in a different country with a different language, with a different set of values, and it's and different landscapes. I mean, everything is so different from country to country. And so
yeah,
you have exposure to more types of people. Here in the United States, we have the melting pot, which has been, I think, weaponized, quite frankly,
yeah,
against the population. And by that, I mean, there are what I feel is artificial divides between the groups of people here in the United States. But the average person, when you go from state to state, it's not
yeah,
this, even though it's the same distance as it would
yeah,
be from country to country in the EU, for example, it's not the same difference of population. It's not a different language. It's not a different culture. It's the same culture. So you may visit different landscapes, but it's not a different culture. So the United States just fundamentally doesn't have the same geography.
yeah.
So that's with media manipulation, and you get a population that doesn't understand much of anything else.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, and this what led to some of us not willing to kind of inform themselves by digging into the information and learn about
Yeah.
where things are and how things are. So, including now what's going on with this currency issue here for the U.S. That I was like surprised when I read the article and found out, what the heck, the Federal Reserve is going about QE without even Americans knowing, and and the U.S. government buying about $43 billion worth of bonds. Well, it will mean only one thing and one thing only.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, people are not willing to also take responsibility and educate themselves about the issues. So we
Well,
do
I mean,
our best. We do our best in sharing the information through this medium, but it might not be enough. So, but that's how I feel.
well, man, we're trying.
I
We're doing
know.
the best we
I
can,
know.
and you guys, our viewers, are helping spread the word as much as you
Yeah,
possibly can. But yeah, I mean, information is the ultimate tool. It's the ultimate tool for enlightenment, is to inform as many people as possible about what's really going on. It's hard to tell, if you're not really paying attention, how many people are finding our corner of the internet. Probably, I mean, honestly, not very many compared to how many people are listening to, the
yeah,
big dogs, and the big dogs are all purchased.
that's true.
And so we're trying our best.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So that's why, guys, if this is your first time here, please make sure sign it, subscribe.
It's great.
I'm like, I'm
It's okay.
still
It's late
jet
for
lagged,
you.
but I didn't sleep for the day before the entire day. I was up, so I can
I get
adjust
it.
to the hours. So, but guys, I will do some lives from the streets, whatever I'm gonna be, certain locations. Just give me a few more days here, and once I settle, I will do this. Anything to add, Elizabeth, before we say bye to our viewers here?
That's it, guys. We will probably have a show next week too. It
Yeah,
depends
we will.
on
I'll be in a
where
different
David is.
location, but I don't. I'll. Our community is very, very crucial to me. I mean, I'm gonna share a story with you guys if you allow me here. Today I was standing in a restaurant, not the restaurant the way you and I know. It's just where small place, they have homemade food made there, and they sell it. So I was just talking, chatting a little bit with them, and somebody was passing by, and he turned to me and said, "You the guy in the channel?"
No
And I was
way.
like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, you're the guy on the channels, right? You talk about that. I like your stuff."
Oh, that's
I
so
was like,
cool.
out of the blue. How would
Wow.
you expect something in some other parts of the world? I was in not expecting to see anybody because there was small place where I was at. And we
Yeah.
stepped out, and he said, "Yeah, I listen to your stuff, and I really enjoy what you're saying and talking about." So, well, thank you very much. He said, "I happen to be an American too, but I live here." I said, "Okay." I said, we take picture? He said, "No." He
Yeah.
felt shy about pictures or whatever. I said, "That's fine. I respect that." So I said,
That's
"But
so
I
cool.
said, I'm gonna share this with our community because
Mhm.
that's how it is." So I just want to share this one. So, and I was like, wow. Even that person at the restaurant was like, Who are you?" "Oh, I'm just David." So
Awesome.
it's like,
That's
must
so
be.
cool.
I know,
Well,
it was surprising.
you
So
know
I got
what?
it now 3 times. One in
That's
the Middle East, West
amazing.
Asia, one now in Europe, and one in Asia. It was in Hong Kong.
You know what? Maybe
Yeah,
one day we will get big enough that that'll happen all over the place.
it will be
I would
as long as we help people understand what's going on because we care.
That's the thing is I would like to I would man, I'd like to be in a position where we could talk to more people. I'd like to be in a position where we could talk to I mean, yeah, all of you guys, I'm sure, have people in your lives that are they're so uninformed and
Yeah.
they're giving their opinions all over the place.
Well,
Um,
the way we can do this is, for example, to organize an open forum. Let's say you do a meet and greet presentation or something like that, where we have people all over the world in different
yeah,
parts of the world. If they were all in one location, let's say, it'll be easier to do, but it will be very challenging. On
yeah,
the
I'd
other
have
hand,
to do like online
yeah,
maybe.
we do have our viewers in let's say we go to country A, and we just announce it and see how many will show up. You
Yeah,
never
that
know.
might be really fun. That might be cool.
So,
All right, well,
something
we
to
will let you go, David. I know
yeah,
that it is late for you.
it is indeed. So, well, guys, I will thank you for being here. We truly, truly appreciate you, and we will see you next week. So, you take care, guys. Bye bye.